Welcome to the recorded video of our Lunch and Learn from February 25th, 2021 about the Deborah Sampson Act. We begin with a slideshow lasting approximately 2.5 minutes, which preceded our speakers, showing images and highlighting sections of the bill itself. Feel free to watch or just fast forward a bit to the start of the program itself. Thank you for watching. Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your busy workday with us. It looks like we still have folks signing in. We have more than 100 people signed in right now, which is an awesome turnout. Again, thank you all so much. If you, as you're signing in here, please feel welcome to add in the chat if you set it to all panelists and attendees, everyone will be able to see it. Please add who you are, where you're from, what you do. We are glad to see you, and we have folks coming in from all over the country. So let us know who you are. And because we have so many folks on today, if you raise your hand, unfortunately, we're not going to be doing spoken questions today, but please, if you have questions as our speakers are telling their stories and sharing about their work and insights on the Deborah Sampson Act, please put your questions in the Q&A section so that we can get through questions, look for questions that we can get to with the time that we have, and following this, we'll be able to follow up with you by email if we are not able to get to your question during the hour that we have together today. So please put in your comments, please put in your questions, and we will attempt to get to all of it. If not during our session, we will endeavor to get to it following this by email and be in touch with you. So again, this is amazing. As you all are signing in, thank you so much. So to introduce myself, my name is Kristen Rouse. I am an Army veteran. I have combat tours in Afghanistan. I am also the Deputy Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the New York State Division of Veterans Services. At the Division of Veterans Services, we stand ready to assist all veterans, whoever you are, in New York State, veterans and families. We are here to assist you with connecting with your VA and state benefits. So if you need some help with a VA claim, If you need help learning about or accessing state benefits, we are here to serve you. If you want to get in touch, all you have to do is reply to the confirmation that you received from Zoom. That's my email address. Just reply to me and we can get you in touch with folks here in New York that are close to you. We are here to serve you. Also, to let you know, if you are a New York veteran who was discharged on a less than honorable discharge status, we are interested in serving you as well, especially in looking at your case if it is related to PTSD, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, or discrimination against your sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So again, we welcome all veterans, all family members to get in touch with us in the state of New York. Just reply to me using your Zoom confirmation here. So we are here today to talk about the Deborah Sampson Act, which was signed into law in just this past January. The Deborah Sampson Act will transform so many aspects of VA care and services for women veterans and build upon the many changes that so many folks have worked hard for within VA and in the advocacy space, and all of those improvements that we've seen in the last couple decades for women veterans. Deborah Sampson Act is going to take those changes to the next level. I am so proud to be joined today by some incredible women who had a hand in making the Deborah Sampson Act into a reality, including Allison Jaslow, Melissa Bryant, and Andrea Goldstein. We will also hear from attorney and advocate Megan Brooks. First, I want to say thank you to the National Association of State Women Veteran Coordinators, who have partnered in making this event happen and inviting so many of you from around the country. I am honored to be joined today by my co-host, Laura McKee, who is the Women Veterans Coordinator for the state of Indiana and Senior Advisor to the National Association of State Women Veteran Coordinators. So take it away, Laura.
Well, thank you, Kristen. And on behalf of the National Association of State Women Veterans Coordinators, we would like, for those who participated and helped put this together, I want to thank you for your dedication and hard work getting Deborah Sampson Act passed into law. It has taken 4 years of dedication and determination for me to get to this point. I am a Air Force veteran. I'm also the Women's Veteran Coordinator in Indiana and Senior Advisor for the National Association of State Women Veterans Coordinator. The association consists of members who work on the state level representing women veterans across the nation. We assist with funding utilities, we educate women veterans regarding state and federal benefits, and we guide women veterans to the resources to improve mental and physical health. To find your state women veterans coordinator, please contact your state veteran department or the state division of veterans. You can also look on the National Association of State Women Veterans Coordinators website at www.NASWVC.org. Deborah Sampson Act is directly aligned with our association's four focal points, and that being military sexual trauma, homelessness, preventing suicide, and access to health care. With this monumental accomplishment, the National Association of State Women Veterans Coordinators is greatly eager to and anticipating the improvement of VA services. Trust with women veterans in VA health care will continue to improve and ultimately increase the women veterans who seek VA as their healthcare provider. On that note, I'll give it back to Kristen and the New York State Division of Veterans Services. Thank you for allowing the National Association to be a part of this event.
Hey, thank you so much, Laura. I think some folks in the chat are saying that they were getting the audio a little choppy. We apologize for that. We will, Laura, if you could make sure that you put the NASWVC website in the chat there, so that's clear for folks. But again, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you to the National Association of State Women Veteran Coordinators, and again, thank you all to looks like we have more than 160 people on the line right now. So again, thank you so much for spending your busy weekday with us. And before we get to our speakers, I do want to say thank you and congratulations to Jeremy Butler. If you could come up, Jeremy, great. So so Jeremy is a Navy veteran, a Navy reservist, and the current CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And and his team helped to bring the Deborah Sampson Act to the finish line. And I just want to say congratulations and just give you a moment to share what this really means for the veterans community.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate it, and it's great to see everyone that's on this Zoom. And you obviously picked the right panel because those are the folks, including yourself, that really got us to where we are today. So the Deborah Sampson Act, as you'll hear, is something dreamed up 4+ years ago by those that are going to be on this Zoom that will be talking to you. And at the time, it was really kind of groundbreaking, and I think there was a lot of veterans and a lot of veteran organizations out there that were very skeptical about this idea, and this group did an amazing job pushing it forward to a point now where it not only passed, as you said, in January and was signed into law in January, but now women's issues are kind of on the platforms of all major veterans groups, and that is because of the work of your panel and the Deborah Sampson Act. And just the one last thing that I would leave us with is, as always happens with legislation, where you started isn't usually what you end up with. There's stuff that didn't make it into the final version of the Deborah Sampson Act, but IAVA is very much looking forward to continuing this fight. The passage of this bill isn't the end, it's really just the beginning. I'll be testifying a week from today before the joint House and Senate VA committees and continue to push forward with more of the work for women veterans that we want to have done is going to be part of that platform that we're pushing forward. So thank you again, Kristen. Appreciate you letting me be here.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And also, everybody make sure that you catch Jeremy's really excellent and important op-ed in yesterday's USA Today, talking about the severity of the impacts of the COVID crisis on Black veterans in particular. Again, that was in yesterday's USA Today, a really important op-ed. I encourage you to take a look at that, Jeremy. If you could drop the link in the chat so folks can link up to that. Great work, Jeremy. And now we will get to our panel. So I want to introduce Allison Jaslow, who I know was trying to get to lunch in between the engagements she's been on today. So we are lucky to have Allison Jaslow with us. Allison is an Army veteran. She is the former executive director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, which Jeremy now took the helm from. She is a seasoned political and communication strategist, and she is currently teaching and sharing her wisdom and experience with students at Duke University. And again, we are really lucky to have her. So Allison, if you're able to bring your camera on and bring your audio on and share a little bit with us. Are you able to get in here, Allison? So we will wait for Allison to. I think she's having some technical difficulties, but we will come back to Allison. But so stand by for Allison. Or let me see. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. And so if you have been on my events before, you will know that that I host and I do the technical work as well. So this is part of the fun of joining us. There you are, Allison. Can we hear you?
Yep.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. I know it's hard to catch you with everything that you're working on, but if you would take us back in the Wayback Machine to whenever this began for you. What was the genesis? What was the beginning of the Deborah Sampson Act, and what was it like getting this introduced? Building the legislative support, the support on Capitol Hill. Why did you do it, and how did you do it, and what was it like?
Sure. Well, first, I want to be sure to thank you for your leadership, like not only on the Deborah Sampson Act, but I think you using your convening authority to kind of bring this conversation together is not something that a lot of other people are doing for women vets in the country today. So my hat's off to you, Kristen. To the other panelists as well, who've not only been in this fight, but I'm happy that they're on this panel because I am not a policy expert myself. So I will leave talking the policy and the weed stuff to them. And then thanks to everybody who is on here who's played some role in getting the Deborah Sampson Act across the finish line, from Jeremy to whomever else was calling, elected officials. It really took an army to get this thing done. And it really needed, not just women vets because we're too small, all ourselves, but for us to talk to our civilian women friends or our male veteran allies to really build the coalition of support to get this done. So to answer your question, Kristen, so women veterans were, I'm going to take you back to like 2016, actually. At that time, women veterans were becoming a little bit of a priority on other VSOs. IAVA had women vets as a priority for a number of years. Of course, IAVA does around 6 or so priorities every year. But it had made it into the American Legion maybe a little bit, maybe into the DAV. DAV had done a report. But the reality is that as much as we were a quote unquote priority to VSOs after 15 years of being at war, nobody was prioritizing women veterans. We were always taking a back seat to other very worthwhile priorities, but there's the huge push for the post 9/11 GI Bill one year, the Veterans Jobs Act one year, veteran suicide. So once some of these big fights were won, at IAVA, actually before I got to the organization in late 2015, they were hoping to make women veterans the #1 priority in 2016. Which is huge. And I would still say that I don't think we'd be having this conversation about success of the Deborah Sampson Act if, one, IAVA wasn't in existence, and two, if IAVA wasn't willing to take the risk to make women veterans its #1 priority. Ultimately, we had some other things come up in 2016. It was a presidential election year. There were a lot of reactive fights that we got into on Capitol Hill that year. But in 2017, we were able to actually make women veterans the #1 priority. We launched our campaign, which Deborah Sampson Act was the signature piece of legislation as a part of a broader advocacy campaign in Women's History Month, so March of 2017. So the idea behind kind of like the direction we took for all of this, so there's a couple of components that I'd like to talk about, especially if I can be of service. Kristen mentioned that I'm teaching. I actually just came out of class earlier today. So to the extent I can share wisdom with all of you too. I think there are a couple of reasons why we went in the direction that we did. One, I would just say is just like advocacy 101. If you really want to succeed, not just in a campaign, but if the goal of the campaign is to get landmark legislation passed, you need to communicate really well. And what you have to do is you have to communicate directly to people to actually be able to kind of influence their opinions. And that, in effect, then builds the will to get politicians to do what we kind of wanted them to be doing to begin with. So a lot of the way that we built the campaign was kind of in that framework. And then I'm of the belief, we were sitting around the table, working on how we were going to put this together, that while there are a lot of barriers to not only women getting care and a lot of deficiencies in actual care, which is the stuff that, again, the policy folks are going to talk about, had to be fixed, I would argue that the biggest barrier to women getting what they have earned and deserve, women veterans getting what they've earned and deserved through their service in terms of care, was actually a cultural barrier and an overall lack of recognition. That the reason we couldn't even get people to hear us, to see us, and to act for us is because they oftentimes just didn't really know that we were there. They didn't know us. And so that is kind of like the framework that we built the campaign around, was to try and actually solve that problem with the idea that all of the other fixes would come behind that. So that's why when we put together the campaign, for many of you who followed this for a long time, there was an actual Deborah Sampson Act with policy fixes for care, a lot of things like getting, peer counselors, maternity and newborn care, getting better safety measures in there to especially be, supportive of military sexual trauma survivors. But, what we sort of wrapped around all of this were two things. A name, Deborah Sampson Act, was chosen specifically because this is a woman who not only disguised herself to serve, but well before people thought that women were serving, right, in the Revolutionary War. But then this is also a woman herself who fought to be recognized after she served, after we became this republic that we are today, to get the pension and benefits that she actually fought for. So there was a message in the name that was kind of getting at that core problem. And then we also included in the first piece of legislation, I'll mention in a minute, how this or why this probably changed and towards the second iteration of the Deborah Sampson Act. But we actually asked the Congress to change the VA's motto, to care for him who shall have borne the battle and his widow and his orphan, with, again, the idea that even the VA's motto itself doesn't recognize that we're here, that even, there are many women who got killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, and their survivors aren't recognized by the chief, motto, the sign on the front door of the VA. And so the hope is that being able to kind of have a conversation around those two things would help people get a little better perspective on where women veterans sit in this country, how unseen and invisible we actually are, but then start to kind of move hearts and minds to our side to ultimately get the will of the people and our allies in Congress to move in our direction to actually get this done. I will say, if you look at John Tester's press release from the first time he introduced this in 2017, and you look at it the second time in 2019, he included the cultural aspect the first time, but they not only took out the sense of Congress that the motto should be changed, which, by the way, was not binding at all, but he also took out that we were even going towards cultural issues and just went sort of towards the brass tacks of getting better care for women, which is ultimately what was addressed in the Deborah Sampson Act that was passed. The reason I bring this up is because the backstory here is, and you see this with a lot of other advocacy that's happening these days, talking about that stuff made people really uncomfortable. They hid behind the fact that it was Lincoln's words, et cetera, but the whole point was to get people to understand that women were being asked to be second-class veterans. And those conversations put people in their corners. And I think it was ultimately decided for a lot of reasons, in part because the other VSO's support went cold and the first Deborah Sampson Act stalled, to take that stuff out for the success of the broader bill. But I would say the good news story in that is that what that did start doing was get a conversation that needed to be started. And I think that conversation has continued to happen. And then thankfully, because of some other New York representatives, Kathleen Rice and Kirsten Gillibrand, the motto piece was able to be reintroduced into a separate bill. So even if it needed to be taken out of the Deborah Sampson Act, so it didn't imperil the Deborah Sampson Act's success, it was still a conversation that was being had inside the Vets Committee, inside the halls of Congress. I think these women were surprised to kind of wake up to what they felt was a very common sense idea would get so much resistance, and that really opened up their eyes as well. And so I think, just to give you some context around the broader fight and the environment that we created, not only hopefully creating change in America, but also on Capitol Hill to actually create a space for the Deborah Sampson Act to get passed. Did all of that make sense, Kristen, and get to sort of the core of what you were hoping I would offer?
No, absolutely. I mean, and that I've known you for years, and I just learned some stuff. So so thank you so much for sharing that. And full disclosure, before I stepped into my position with New York State, I'm a longtime IAVA member, and and I've served on the board, and I was there with, for the introduction of Deborah Sampson, and and so I remember remember the days of some pushback, and there's still some pushback, but to have such a bold agenda, to really push boldly, to say no, really, these conversations do need to happen. We do need to address this. This may not be popular. This may be hard, may be difficult to talk about, but we need to move this forward. And I think, to your point, this really has yielded a lot in terms of getting women veterans on the radar and getting and enabling the really substantive policy changes that we have seen with Deborah Sampson, and that hopefully will continue to follow this momentum. And so, so I say thank you to you, Allison. I call you Jaslow, but thank you, Allison Jaslow, for everything that you were willing to put on the line to really move the ball forward on this. Yeah.
And if I can just say one thing that I'm like remiss in even saying before I jump here is, I will take to my grave that I believe that one of the biggest unsung heroes in all of this is Jon Tester. I don't know if there's anybody here from Montana, not only in getting it, intelligently into an appropriations bill to ultimately get the final bill passed, but he was there with us from the beginning, and he, in the category of male allies out there, like he's never wavered since day one. He's been as much of a champion in his own Jon Tester way from the beginning, and he was crucial to bringing John Bozeman in on it, so this could authentically be a bipartisan effort from the beginning. So I want to make sure that he gets adequate praise, because I really, again, there was an army here, but I really wonder where we'd be if we didn't have the strong leadership of Jon Tester from the start.
So such a good point. And, and again, thank you so much, Allison. I want to also bring in Melissa Bryant, who was there at the inception of this when she was leading policy for IAVA. And so Melissa Bryant, a national treasure, as all of you are, an Army veteran, former policy chief for IAVA. She then was the policy chief for the American Legion, and I am also proud to say that she is a new appointee at VA in the new administration as senior advisor to VA's Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs, and we're really lucky to have her with us today. And Melissa, if you want to talk about some of the policy specifics of Deborah Sampson and what it was like in that first introductory year, and what it was like to fight for Deborah Sampson, and the changes that you saw as that unfolded. Please take it away, Melissa.
Yes, well, it's so good to be reunited with old friends. Good to see you, Jaslow. Good to see Jeremy, and even our friends who are coming on after this. So thank you, Allison. I'm going to pick up right where Allison left off, because this is a good chronology of how we got to where we are now. And I can even maybe give, on a non-official capacity, I must say that, some insight into where we're going and implementing it at this point. But I also don't want to steal some of Andrea's thunder as well, and talking about her additions within Deborah Sampson. I came to IAVA in January of 2017. Obviously I'm a Biden-Harris appointee, and so my politics are clear. And so I'm going to be blunt in saying that we walked into quite a storm of politics that were at that time when we introduced the first Deborah Sampson Act. And as Allison so rightfully pointed to, when we first introduced it in the 115th, it was controversial under the Trump administration. It was controversial to even dare speak of, frankly, lady parts, let alone talking about women being recognized in their service. And I say this as a third-generation combat veteran, but the first woman in my family to serve, a Black family that has served for generations, which I also like to add because we have intersectionality that's at the root of this as well. And as a part of the introduction in the 116th, which I think is where Allison left off, as Chief Policy Officer at IAVA, that was one of the things that I unfortunately knew politically, was that it was in policy speak a poison pill, and it was something that was not going to get bipartisan support and ultimately harm care for women veterans, which was of course the goal. And so recognition is still the goal. And I'm very proud to say that in working with VA now, our current secretary, Dennis McDonough, has addressed this with the press already. He was asked just in a press conference on Tuesday about the motto. And while we're still waiting on final guidance from White House, and we're still waiting on whether this legislation is going to be introduced again, I'm talking Brett Rice's bill that Allison talked about vis-a-vis the motto, we very much are already working in the spirit of speaking to caring for those who have won the battle, our families, our survivors, and using that gender neutral language and understanding that we serve everyone. And we just even released a memo speaking to LGBTQ and speaking to transgender veterans and making it a welcoming environment, because that's a commitment from President Biden. And that comes straight from the top, is that we will recognize all veterans who have served, regardless of gender, regardless of race, creed, color, etc. So navigating the Deborah Sampson back in those days, so difficult. It was a lot of shoe leather. I'm going to give a shout out to another unsung hero. I don't know if he's on the line, but Jeremy, give him another raise. Tom Porter, who is the king of shoe leather as we speak on the Hill, and is the one who really tried to make this go forward, and always was never afraid to speak on behalf of women veterans. And, you know, I love Tom. He's a good buddy of mine. We text and joke back and forth, and you know, he's a little bit old school. He wasn't always the most progressive in thinking about women veterans. And so there was even some education that we had to give him in advocating for it. And it would, but what he took as gospel and then spread said gospel. And he would take it to our champions like John Tester, who is now chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. He would take it to John Bozeman, who was at the time the second ranking member of the committee after Johnny Isaacson. We got Dr. Phil Rowe on board in the next version of it, and which was monumental because he was not in favor of either Deborah Sampson. He had a 30-year history as a obstetrician gynecologist in the great state of Tennessee, so he brought that medical thought with him. But as we were continuing the conversations and merging the two bills between HVAC and SVAC, the House Veterans Affairs Committees and the Senate Veterans Affairs Committees, he started to come around, and he realized that things like locking doors within, you know, spaces and ensuring that we can get through to the said spaces in women's clinics, so that you had a women veterans program manager and an ombudsman and all of these things, that he really did help champion that, and eventually got to the point of even championing the motto itself. And before he retired at the end of the last Congress, he also championed changing the motto. In fact, I want to say that his quote verbatim, and Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong when she comes on, was that I want to associate myself with change to recognize all veteran service to include women veterans. I'm hopeful that we have common sense, bipartisan agreement on what we can move forward with vis-a-vis the recognition and the motto, but then also all of the healthcare aspects that are within the Deborah Sampson. And with that, I think it's a great segue over to Andrea, because she is very much a credit to how big Deborah Sampson, it became its own minibus. It started off as something with 5 provisions in the 115th. And by the time it was reintroduced in the 116th and passed in the National Defense Authorization, or as a part of the appropriations bills that got passed in December of last year, that is largely a credit to Andrea's work and her convening authority on the Hill as staffer, and the Women Veterans Task Force chaired by another champion of ours, Chairwoman Brownlee, and her fabulous pink blazers, who is always there for women veterans. So it took a village, and we got it through. And I can tell you from where I sit with the secretary, and I was just with him on Tuesday, he cares, he's there, he gets it, we care. I care for those of us at VA, and we are going to implement Deborah Sampson thoughtfully and in partnership with all of you, really, because all of you are stakeholders. And I just appreciate you all so much in getting this monumental bill through. It truly is one of the highlights of my professional career.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I mean, and I just have to say, like, how inspired I am by we've been talking about an Army who got this done. It takes a Navy too, Andrea. But, you know, really, I mean, such a huge number of women veterans who made this happen, who did the work, who did the advocacy, who met with their legislators, and also, and then Andrea, who was able to step in as a Navy veteran and a serving Navy reservist, who hails from the great state of New York. I got to say that, on behalf of New York State, but she was able to take on the role of senior policy advisor for the U.S. House of Representatives. The Veterans Affairs Committee has a woman veterans, they stood up a woman veterans task force, like Melissa just mentioned. And Andrea has been, convening hearings and bringing in input and doing incredible work that really added so much to the Deborah Sampson Act and got it over the finish line to what it is today and what it will become. And Andrea is a tremendous change maker, and I want to hand it off to her wisdom.
Well, thank you, Kristen. And Melissa, it's awesome to follow you. I mean, I feel like we became friends through the process of getting this bill over the finish line. And congratulations again. I'm so glad you're in the building. As Melissa highlighted, the bill started with just a handful of provisions, and the initial version we ended up sending over to the Senate was 40 pages long and comprised of something like close to 15 different bills. But there was a lot that we added to it from there was a lot that we added to it from the original version. I mean, and it was a convening very much like this, where we heard from one of the state directors about access to vet centers for military sexual trauma survivors who were in the Guard and Reserve, or the lack of access. And it happened to be at a time when we were doing final edits, and we're able to drop a provision in like within a week of learning about that. That doesn't usually happen. I mean, as you've all learned, it is a really, really long, lengthy process that requires engaging with a lot of stakeholders. And one of the unique challenges of my job was managing coalitions of both formal groups, but also, I see some very familiar names on here of women who have individually, I see you, Diana Danis, individually organizing for 40 years. And may or may not be part of a formal group, but really want to remain actively engaged, and are also training others on how to engage with legislators, so that you can actually, if you're, I always say it's like, if you're bringing me a problem, try to give me some kind of solution. Even if it's not the perfect answer, we can at least work with that. So there was a lot of that throughout the process of, we visited 22 different VA sites and a handful of DOD sites. And that was from March of 19 to February of 20, all in the process of pulling this together. And we were very, very surprised about, the motto provision did not make it into the final version, but the motto provision did pass the House as suspension. So that means it had more than 2/3 support. So it had wide bipartisan support in the House. Now, there's also a lot that's not in the bill. There's almost nothing on reproductive health. In fact, I don't think any of the reproductive health bills got pulled into Deborah Sampson at the last minute. So there's still a lot, or rather they didn't get pulled in. We had conversations about them. There was a bill that would, the Equal Access for Contraception to Veterans Act, which would eliminate copays on contraception, that we had discussed potentially adding into the end of year package, but it was not supported in the Senate. So we still have our work cut out for us, because there's still a lot that requires either change in the law, or doesn't necessarily require a change in the law, but if you make it law, it cannot be changed easily depending on who's elected in the executive branch.
I mean, what incredible work, Andrea. I mean, like, just the journey that you've been on, and like, I mean, I wasn't even aware of the full scope of all the site visits. I was able to witness virtually many of the hearings that you convened to get a lot of input that we saw that ended up in the final version. I mean, incredible work. And, and again, it took so many great folks to make all of this happen. I mean, stay stay on the line, Andrea, because I'm gonna circle back and do a little bit of a speed round. But I do want to highlight, one of the inputs that you all were able to get in, which was the provision for legal services for women veterans. A great advocate here in New York, Samantha Kubek, with New York Legal Assistance Group, I know she was one of your panelists who provided testimony on the tremendous value of legal services for women veterans that has been provided here in New York. That can be an example for what can work nationwide, or hopefully is working in many other places. Samantha had to duck out at the last minute. She had a family issue come up today, but I wanted to bring in a spokesperson from New York Legal Assistance Group, and I'm really proud to have Megan Brooks with us today, who she has previously done work at the Yale Law School Veterans Clinic, and has really done great things for veterans in her in her not long yet career. But I know you got great things ahead, Megan. But so tell us a little bit about the advocacy and what's been working here in New York, and what we will see down the road as Deborah Sampson is implemented.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I'm here on behalf of Sam Kubek, my incredible colleague, not on my own behalf. And just being in the virtual room here with Andrea and Melissa and Allison and you, Kristen, is really incredible. So much work went into this, and we are so excited from the perspective of legal services providers for the benefits that are gonna, we believe and hope and expect to come for our women clients moving forward. So Sam's involvement, again, comes from this legal service provider perspective. She testified at a House Vets Committee back in a meeting back in February of 2020 in support of the Act. And her testimony focused on the experiences of her clients and on her experience as an advocate working for those clients. And so what Sam did is she established the first women veteran exclusive legal services clinic in a VA medical center. So that clinic operates today at the Bronx and Manhattan VA hospitals. It's been in operation since 2017. And the goal is really to provide a safe space for women veterans to receive trauma-informed legal services, which is critical because the majority of Sam's clients, unfortunately, have experienced military sexual trauma and suffer from health consequences, both mental and physical, as a result. And so there are a few different problems that I believe that this act is going to help solve, and is going to help erase some of those barriers or lower some of those barriers to healthcare access, and in turn make getting access to VA recognition for claims easier, and also makes getting access to compensation, really critical compensation for these sorts of claims, easier. And so just to sort of I won't touch on all the provisions. There are so many that are going to be helpful, but the two that I want to sort of touch on most basically, and then sort of tie in how we believe our experience ties in, are the provision number one, that for military sexual trauma claims moving forward, there is a requirement that there's going to be specialized, culturally competent teams to process claims related to military sexual trauma. And this is huge because a military sexual trauma claim is a huge undertaking for clients. It is thoroughly traumatizing, and the way that it's been happening at the VA is re-traumatizing for too many survivors. Just to quickly walk you through the process, and this is a large part of what Sam testified about to Congress back a year ago, is it starts with having to retell your story. Part of the process of the claim is sort of showing the VA that your story is quote unquote credible, which can be tough, whereas we know it's so difficult to report in service. So many people don't, and those who do face retaliation. And so you have to tell that story. You have to gather records related to that story. You may have to go to friends, service buddies, family members, ask for letters where they support your story. And then over the course of the claim, once the claim is actually submitted to VA, the way it's been working is VA will give folks a call out of the blue. It sort of can come to your cell phone in the middle of a regular day. from a stranger, often from a man. A lot of survivors have trouble discussing the experience with men in particular, female survivors, that is. And they will just sort of make you run down the events that led to the trauma, which can be incredibly triggering and just will not come at a safe space in a safe time most of the time. Then there's an invasive compensation and pension exam where you have to repeat the same story to a VA claims provider. And then when you finally get to the decision, oftentimes the language that's used, if it's a denial, really is re-traumatizing as well. The language will say things like, you may feel that this happened to you, or it'll just flat out say the evidence is not credible, which can be devastating for a survivor who put so much time and effort and hope into the idea that she might be believed in coming forward. And so we are hopeful that these teams are going to really smooth the process out for folks as they move forward. The other thing that we are super excited about, and Sam is over the moon about this, is the provisions in the Deborah Sampson Act and in the larger bill that are going to provide legal services access for women veterans at VA medical centers. So it's a pilot program to start. We don't know exactly how it's going to work, but essentially there's a requirement that VA enter into agreements with providers who are going to focus on a variety of civil legal services that are most needed by women vets, which include VA benefits, discharge upgrades for folks who didn't come out of service with an honorable, child support cases, landlord-tenant, just what the most basic things are going to get VA funding, and 10% actually of the funding that's supposed to support legal services for all of veterans experiencing homelessness needs to be earmarked for women veterans experiencing homelessness, which is huge as well. So in addition to all that, there's some great provisions that are going to help lower those barriers to healthcare access. Again, the more healthcare access of that gets, the easier it is to prove that service connection when it comes to a claim. Some of them require, for example, prosthetics designed and fitted for women. The new sexual harassment and assault policy, which requires the VA to address the pervasive issue of sexual harassment that goes on in VA facilities. Sam's experienced it, Andrea, and you've been very public about experiencing it. It's hopefully gonna help us shape the culture and make the VA a welcoming place for our clients to not just receive those healthcare services they need, but to really sort of lift them up and receive the legal services they need as well to live the incredible lives we know that they can.
There is so much in the Deborah Sampson Act. There is so much content, and I mean, thank you, Megan, for going over some of that. From the anti-harassment and assault policy that's going to be required for applying to patients and employees at VA. To make it a safe and welcoming space for all veterans, to streamline and ease the process for folks who survived military sexual trauma. I mean, it's the potential for piloting programs for childcare so that that parents can access the medical appointments they need. The 5-year retrofit plan so that all VA facilities are able to appropriately care for women with the right equipment, with all the right, with the right providers, with the right equipment, for women to be able to access prosthetics at their VA facility. I mean, this is such a deeply detailed, testament to how much work has gone into it by folks on this panel and so many others as well. I mean, it's really incredible. Let me just do a speed round with you guys on, Melissa, like what are you looking forward to most as this gets implemented?
I'm certainly looking forward to the childcare provision, which Andrea just mentioned in the chat is permanent. Such a huge barrier for many of us who are balancing work and life. And as we know, especially the pandemic has exposed for so many women, how many have dropped out of the workforce because of the pandemic and its impact on childcare. And it shouldn't impact our healthcare on top of that, because we're also going through a mental health crisis, children, parents, everyone right now. And so we knew that this was necessary even before the pandemic, and it's just prescient and reinforced that it's absolutely something that we need to provide. And so that's one of the things that I'm most happy about, in addition to the entire suite of legal services that Megan just covered, that Sam, who I also have to give a shout out to because her makeup game is always on point, and I know she would have been here and given me a comment about my lips. So I wore this for Sam.
That is
but
so true. I'll pass it on.
yes. But you know, there's so many things that we were just not acknowledging that women needed. And, you know, back to Andrea's point, one of the things that I'm looking forward to, and I know she's going to push us from the Hill, and when it gets over to us, then I'm going to push for its swift and thorough implementation, is anything involving reproductive rights. We know that we still have not crossed the barriers in terms of providing IVF to all women and to couples, I should say, because to include same-sex couples. So there's still some work to do. We have the Stop Harassment campaign that's a part of the sexual harassment and sexual assault piece that we're trying to combat within VA. I'll be the first to tell you, we're not there yet. I got a complaint from a friend just over the last weekend from one of the VAs that she felt harassed and that she felt uncomfortable going to her VA. It broke my heart, and I sent it directly to the 10th floor at the VA central office, because that's how much emphasis we're putting onto fixing these things. I also want to give another shout out to another champion, and that's Dr. Patty Hayes, who is with the Center for Women's Health. I saw Andrea's eyes light up. There's many good people. There are so many good people who are fighting for this change. Some of it was already there in VA. It got codified into law, and thank goodness, because now we have the ammunition to say, this is not right. We're going to fix it, and we're going to be committed to helping all of the women who cross through VA's doors, all of us on this call right now.
Awesome. And, you know, and I am so personally proud of you, Melissa, that, you know, that we have great folks with a world of experience and insights who will be part of implementing this. And also I want to give a shout out to folks from the Center for Women Veterans. You know, Liz Estabrooks, I believe, has been able to dial in, and Messina Shalas. You know, thank you to everybody who's employed by VA, who does great work. You all do great work every day. We're proud of what you do, and we're looking forward to getting you all some more support as you serve women veterans, you know, through the Deborah Sampson Act, and as state officers and in the VSO and nonprofit community. You know, we are all one community. With the end goal of ensuring that all veterans get the quality of services and care that they deserve at VA. And so, you know, so thank you to everybody who's making that possible, because it's taking everybody. Andrea, if you want to share with us, what are you, I mean, I know like you worked on so much of this, but what's something that we haven't mentioned yet that you're looking forward to being implemented?
So something that we started to do in the second half and the second session of the 116th Congress is working a lot more on, first of all, we have benefits issues. The Deborah Sampson Act primarily addressed VHA. There's a lot of work to be done on for serving survivors of military sexual trauma on the VBA side. There's also a lot more that we can do regarding connectivity between DoD and VA for a number of issues, but certainly for supporting survivors of military sexual trauma. My boss, Chairwoman Brownlee and Chairwoman Spear, introduced an amendment to the NDAA last year. That's the National Defense Authorization Act that became law that would do just that. I did say I want to answer some of the questions that were in the chat so that there's some clarification. First of all, yes, VA provides comprehensive reproductive health care. In fact, some of the healthcare they're providing, especially prenatal care that integrates mental health and physical health, is really phenomenal. Like they'll provide breast pumps and prenatal classes and you know, certainly like well woman exams. The shortfall, and they do provide contraception. There's an odd, but sometimes you run into like legal glitches. So VA was, when the Affordable Care Act passed, VA was exempt from the requirement to provide contraception without a copay. So anyone who has to pay a copay for their prescriptions at VA has to pay a copay, which is an inequity. And again, when I also highlighted it as being a glitch, if you get long-acting reversible contraceptives like an IUD, that's considered a prosthetic, not a medication. So that's actually covered, right? So sometimes, a lot of the time, we're fixing these statutory glitches, as one would say. There are also some issues in equity regarding IVF. Someone highlighted the issue of women tend to when women have infertility, it tends to have unknown cause, and it's very difficult to identify if it's service connected or not. In addition to the fact that currently same-sex couples cannot receive IVF, single women cannot receive IVF services. So there's still work to be done. And in addition, there is still, women still do not have access to the full spectrum of reproductive health information, to include information if they wish to terminate a pregnancy for any reason. And there's still some issues regarding what is and is not, what the federal government can and cannot provide. But VA has the most restrictive ban on not just providing services, but information to veterans in the entire federal government. So there's still work to be done. Some of it requires change in law, some of it doesn't. But I also finally wanted to get to that point about working between DOD and VA, because today's service women are tomorrow's veterans. We cannot just absorb the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act. What we can do is we can, I tell a lot of my colleagues who work on committee on armed services with oversight of DOD is like, look, I'm from the future. I'm telling you the impacts of your policies 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And so VA has a lot of research, like social, like qualitative, quantitative medical research that looks at the impact of personnel policies, of poor fitting personal protective equipment. And so a lot of what we're also doing is using what we have learned working in this space to ensure that currently serving service women do not have the same challenges.
That's thank you, Andrea. I mean, and I love that. Like, I'm from the future. I mean, because you know, VA catches everything that comes downstream from DOD. And I mean, 20 years of women wearing armor in combat that doesn't fit them. I mean, we've borne the brunt of those musculoskeletal injuries and things that have disproportionately impacted us. Laura, if you're able to come on screen, I know you've been tracking some of the audience questions that have popped up. If you want to ask some of those questions.
Yeah, this is from Emily from Megan, and or no, it's actually to Megan. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. This is for Megan, and Emily asks, does a veteran have to be a VA eligible to obtain legal services?
That is a good question. I do not believe so. So one of the great things the Deborah Sampson Act does, and legislation had been passed several years ago, so anyone who's experienced military sexual trauma, is eligible for VA healthcare related to it. And actually this bill just expanded that to reservists as well. So even if you didn't serve, a day on active duty, I believe that anyone who falls under that policy will likely also fall under the legal services provision policy and will be able to receive legal services. It may get trickier for other folks, but I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work out yet.
Okay, to follow up on that as well, we have a couple questions from Erica Hoover out of Michigan. Thank you, Erica, for being participating. She's one of our members of the National Association of State Women Veterans Coordinators. And she asked, where will pilot legal services for women veterans take place, and have locations been determined, and can we advocate for our states?
That might be a better question for Melissa. I'm not sure actually where it's at, but we're hopeful in New York as always.
Yes. So as I stated before, it's still to be determined and finalized as we implement the law. I think it's no secret that it was a little bit of a rough transition. And so this is week 3 for me on the job. And so just give us a minute to let me find where the bathroom is when we get back there. And we'll be ensuring that that information gets publicized very quickly. And then I also saw some other Q&A. I'm going to jump in. I don't want to jump ahead of you, Laura, but I do want to ask answer some quick questions that I know are probably directed toward VA. The first one is for Benjamin Pomerantz. Number one, see your patient advocate. If you are not, one, you have the right to a chaperone when you go to VA, and for the comp and pen, especially for when it's done by outside contractors out in the community, then your recourse first is to go to the to your patient advocate always, and you can even do that all the way up through the director of the VA. I do know of those who have submitted complaints within the VA that they either were not provided a chaperone, felt uncomfortable for any reason during their visit, or any other issue. It starts there, and it starts with that patient advocate, that customer service representative, who will then in turn keep pushing that up through the chain. But that's where you start if you want to ensure that you have a provider of your gender choice. And I'll just simply say, how do we nominate our medical centers? Actually, I need to get back to that. I know that there's a blog on that on Vantage Point for those who are inside VA. And there's a link to how do you nominate medical centers. So I'll make sure I get back to you. Quick fact sheet with all the provisions. I'm going to leave that to Andrea. And then finally for Kate O'Hare Palmer, I will say that like you, I have been very vocal and even testified before Congress about my own challenges with infertility. And I believe that it is due to toxic exposure from my combat experience in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And it's a very real challenge, and we're seeing challenges from that. I'll also note that I am the daughter of a Vietnam veteran who was exposed to Agent Orange. And we know that that is a service-connected disability for women who served in Vietnam, but not for men. My father had 2 spongy spikes go through his knees. I wonder sometimes if that had an impact on me because I was born with hip dysplasia. And we know that children born with hip dysplasia from women veterans who served and were exposed to Agent Orange, that's a service-connected disability. So there's many things that we need to explore in the research side of the House. And we need to get that research to our great folks like Andrea on the Hill so that we can push that forward. And then I know she's going to work with Armed Services to tie in Vanessa Guillen, to tie in infertility, to tie in reciprocity and parity between DOD and VA, and reconcile all those things. I hope I answered everyone's questions in that lightning 60-second answer.
So thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Melissa. And given that we have we're on the hour, and I want to give the last minute of wisdom to Andrea to take us out. And thank you everybody for being able to sign on here. And if we didn't get to your question live, we will follow up by email. But Andrea, take us out with some wisdom.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of when I think it was over a year ago during a recess week, Melissa came in and did a Advocacy 101 briefing, and this was like we were doing a Zoom broadcast before we were all stuck on Zoom. And something that's really important for everyone to know is, like, if you're one person, you're a constituent. If you're 2 people or more, now you're an interest group. And I've had a lot of conversation with servicewomen and women veterans who feel alone, and you are absolutely not. There are 2 million living women veterans who are having very similar experiences. I strongly encourage you to find find advocacy groups or find social outlets to be together and share these experiences, and engage at both the DC level and with the district offices for your members of Congress. They do want to hear from you. Don't assume because an issue is really obvious to you that it is obvious to lawmakers who have to deal with governing like the entire government. So hearing from you is really critical. We want to hear from you. And as you can see from the Deborah Sampson Act, persistence got it done.
Persistence got it done, and women veterans were the ones to do it. Women veterans and allies. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Allison Jaslow. Thank you to Melissa Bryant. Thank you to Andrea Goldstein. Thank you to Megan Brooks. Thank you to my co-host, Laura McKee, and thank you to the National Association of State Women Veteran Coordinators and all of you who are members who partnered with us and who joined us today. We will follow up with you if you asked a question in the chat or in the Q&A. Keep in touch, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.